This is part 7 of this rebuild series, and here we're going to replace the carburettor and air filter, rebuild the rear handle, fit the top handle and fit the recoil starter. I've removed the top of the rear handle so that it's easier to get the carburettor on. There's just a screw up through there, just a dinky little screw. So, carburettor. It's easier sometimes to put the link on, so it just sits in that little notch there. So you just feed it in like that and it just sits there. It's quite rural really. This rubber here, which covers the adjustment screws, there's all sorts of different kinds depending upon how early or late the saw is. And it lines up with these holes here eventually. So we put the carburettor will just go on like that. But first of all, we have this piece which sits over those two bolts and presses in there and just surrounds the rubber induction pipe. Then there's also this little disc here that sits inside. It's a little bit tricky fitting this and letting you see what's going on. Just pushes inside to stop the potential of that pipe being sucked close. So then the carburettor goes on. Keep the wires tucked out the way. That's the fuel input, and this one on the bottom facing that way is the vacuum. So we get those lined up. As I say, keep the wires out of the way, and that should just pop like that. And then the fuel pipe, which is a bit tricky again, mainly because I'm trying to keep it so in view so that you can see what's going on. So you just pop the fuel pipe on like that, and there you go. So the vacuum pipe will have automatically sorted itself out, and this part of the throttle linkage just pops in there. So then you can see the butterfly opening and closing. So again, this bit's a bit tricky, just because it's a bit floaty around. That spring sits in that notch, and those two pivots sit in their own little housings. Then this top cover goes on, and there's a hook there that actually hooks down in there, and then we put that together and just check. That's the dead man's handle. So there we go. So it won't work now, it will work now. And then the screw goes down in there, except not like that, because it's just gone to one side. Normally they just drop straight in there. Sometimes these are a torque headed screw. This one's a slotted one. This is a fairly, well it's not, yes, fairly early saw. I think it's a 97 or something like that. So there we go. Then what you do is put these two nuts on. That holds the carburettor in place. Wind them down and use a box spanner or a socket or something to once those are bolted down, the air filter can go on, and there are recesses in the back of the air filter to go over those. And you're thinking, where's the choke? Well, the choke on these models is actually in the air filter, just there, and it's operated from a little lever off this cross shaft. So those bolts are tightened down, and I've made sure that the fuel pipe's connected. And then we just, that thing there goes in there, and the two bolts go there and there. So you just got to offer it all up. Sometimes this stop-start spring gets slightly in the way, so just depress it slightly, and then wind the screws in. So this has had a bit of a washing in hot water or warm water and soap or detergent. Never wash them in petrol because it leaves a sticky residue, and then as soon as you start the saw up again, all the muck sticks to it. So if you've got a filter that's brown all over, it's been cleaned in petrol. So that's that. So we're there. Well, the only thing to do really is the spring here is part of the stop mechanism. Operate the trigger. It's on choke. Yeah, that's on half revs. That's on normal revs. So it's all working nicely. Excellent. So there's a good chance the stop will work. Top handle. Here we are. So it just sits on like that. That sits in a boss there, and that sits in a boss there. There we go. Right. Here's the downfall of many a chainsaw and operator. There are two side screws. The long ones are for the side. If you put the long ones in the bottom, then it vibrates against the bottom of the oil tank, and before you know what's happened, you've got a hole in the oil tank. So just make sure the long ones go in the side. Wind them in. Don't over tighten them because they're only going into this hard plastic. You know, if you end up putting that in there and having a 2-foot bar on the end, you're going to rip the plastic threads out. It's really starting to look like a chainsaw now. We're not very far away from putting the plug in. Now then, I'll have to get my short plug spanner for that because I've got the air filter on. I either take the air filter off or I get the short plug spanner. There we go. So I'm going to take it out just to make sure I don't forget, because you don't want to leave these loose because it will vibrate and damage those threads. Recoil starter. These holes here are for ventilation. So the air goes in there, round the fan, and then round the cylinders. So if these get blocked up, you're in trouble. Starter cord, they normally wear here. This is the bit to check. So if you're about to walk half a mile into the woods before you start work, just check there. Yeah, because you don't want the first start snap. That's it. The little pawl, which is, I never cease to wonder at this. See how that just pops out like that? Isn't that a bit of delightful engineering? These are changeable, dead easy. Pop that circlip off, pop a new one in. They do wear on that face, and of course they engage with these notches here. So if you have a starter that sort of every now and again it misses a beat, just change the pawl. They're only they cost less than sweeties. So then that goes on there. Engage this. Then we've got screws in there, and the top screw here has a bushing round it which supports the chain brake. That's that one there. See that bushing there? It's a specific part, that. Again, make sure all the bolts are in before you tighten any one of them. I'm just having a look to see if I can find the other bolt. There's a little rubber grommet that goes over the decompressor. Just need to make sure that's out. I'll have to find an oil cap. Then it's a matter of putting the top cover on, and the back cover, and the plug.